Let's give everyone a few seconds to join us. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority Finance Committee meeting. Today is Friday, February 20, 2026. This meeting is being recorded. Commissioner McMorrin?
Here.
Commissioner Perkins?
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone, and happy Black History Month. Let's go to agenda item 1, acceptance of minutes, including any corrections of our special finance committee meeting held Friday, January 16th, 2026. Any questions or concerns, colleagues? All right. No motion needed, right? Wonderful. So we're moving to our CFO's report. Janine. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, commissioners, and thank you for joining us. I'm here today on behalf of LASA CFO Janine Trejo, who was unable to attend, and I will be presenting the CFO report. Janine Lim, Deputy CFO. I will begin my report with an update on LASA's accounts payable aging, primarily reflecting obligations to our service providers. As I have stated in the service provider meeting this month and various other meetings, this year's delay in contract execution resulted in an influx of invoices being submitted in December. I have also stated that LASA has the capacity to process this influx of invoices. When I reference capacity, I'm speaking of the people on staff to do the job. I believe we have the people within the organization to resolve the issue. However, what we are seeing today is that service providers still remain unpaid. If capacity is not the issue, then what is? In my analysis, we are falling short in process, infrastructural utilization, and morale. I think it is important to understand the historic moment that LASA is in today, which is in an unprecedented change in funding. I state this not to provide excuses, but to provide context to where LASA is falling short. It is during this unique time where LASA is losing half of its funding, where we are also experiencing unprecedented delays in service provider contract execution and payment to service providers. First, I want to highlight LASA's challenges in recruiting and retaining staff. When I arrived in June 2025, my first task was to focus my efforts in the contract and procurement department, a unit that did not have a director. Recruitment efforts led to one offer, which was ultimately rejected by the candidate. The associate director of the contract unit then quit 3 months into my tenure. The only remaining AD in the unit then went on an extended leave, and this leadership vacuum, combined with the low morale, workforce insecure about their future, led to the slow rate of contract execution. This was ultimately resolved by executing a reorganization which focused on providing adequate leadership and additional staff to the unit. But once resolved from that unit, however, the bottleneck in the contracts department moved to the finance department, who are now tasked with processing 6 months of invoicing for all the delayed contracts. The finance department, too, recently experienced a leadership vacuum. Only recently did LASA fill the deputy CFO position, the finance director position, and the controller position. As a result of the recent instability, key improvements to outdated policies and procedures have not been completed, and the utilization of available softwares and tools have not been universally implemented. This has resulted in processes which are unclear across different units within the department, causing inefficiencies which are further compounded by the underutilization of available software and tools. Additionally, as is the trend at LASA, which will only continue through June 30th, our principal accountant resigned early in January amidst the crisis in payables. Due to this turnover in leadership and line staff, veteran staff have become keystone players, staff that hold knowledge of key processes, who have not been able to fully cross-train other staff to share the burden of their workloads due to them being consumed by managing ongoing, evolving crises. Shortly, I will provide you with the hard figures you are all waiting to hear regarding how much is owed to service providers and the granular reasons as to why the funds have not been released. But I want to make sure to communicate the context and environment in which we do this work. LAHSA is experiencing a monumental change, which at the heart of it has affected our people's ability to pivot. No level of staff from the C-suite to our frontline workers are spared the feelings of anxiety of facing an unknown future and the possibility that some of our lives will be drastically different on June 30th, 2026. In spite of these challenges, this is what we are doing now to address the issue. We are loaning staff from other departments to bolster up the invoice process and provide analytical support. We are adding a special projects coordinator to project manage short-term solutions across the finance units and begin the process of updating policies and procedures. We are bringing on temporary staff to support in invoice processing, accounts receivable, and treasury units. Training here will be documented for future support in the department and inform the updating of our policies and procedures. We have engaged a consultant to build dashboards and workflow tools to facilitate communication across the department and aid in decision-making regarding releasing of payments. We have begun a search for a consultant to perform a financial diagnosis, which will highlight areas of process improvement. And now I will get into the figures. Overall, in our payables system, we are managing 72 separate funding streams over 920 contracts. We have a total payables of $69.3 million. Our aged payables of 60 days plus are $26.9 million. The main drivers of our aged payables are the Measure H funding, City HAP rounds 2 to 4, and Inside Safe. Broken down by jurisdiction, in the city, we have a total of 36.4 million total payables. Aging plus 60 days is 10.4 million. The main drivers here are HAP rounds 1 to 4, which total 10.3 million. These require modifications and amendments is in process with the city to address these funds. Another driver of the aged payables is the City Measure A Local Solutions Fund, which totals 6.7 million. LAHSA has received only partial payment for Q1 and can release some of that funding. The next driver is Inside Safe with payables at 7.5 million. We are waiting a payment on Q2 actuals from the city to be able to pay on these. In the county, we have a total of 30.6 million. Aged 60 plus days, 16.3 million. The highlights here, the main drivers here are Measure A at 6.7 million and Measure H at 13.9 million. Measure A, we do have the funding to release the payables. What is causing the delay here specifically is the drawdown of the 29 million, which we must hold in a county, in an interest-bearing account under the county. We must withdraw from the interest-bearing account before we have access to those funds. This month, we were delayed in doing that drawdown. We have now received that 29 million and we can begin to release all funding under Measure A. February advances were also delayed this month due to a trend that the staff raised concerns around outstanding advances that have not been recouped. However, we are moving forward with releasing February advances, which we have already begun to release and will continue to release through early next week. After the February advances have gone out, we will execute an expedited effort to release the March advances by the end of the month, which should reach service providers by early in the first few days of March. Measure H, the 13 million in payables there, the 13.9 million. Much of this falls under a plan that must be approved by the county before these expenses can be paid. There is no identified funding to cover this 13 million, and this plan put forward to the county will utilize service providers outstanding Measure H working capital, as well as any outstanding and annual advances to cover those expenses, and what is not covered by any of those sources will be covered by LASA's working capital. Our payables in the state total 1.6 million. We have no aging there. And our federal payables are 484,000. We have no aging there. As far as service providers, we have 74 service providers that have outstanding payables in our MIP system. 18 of those have payables aged 61 to 90 days, and 51 of those have payables aged 90 plus days. As stated earlier, the main drivers here are Measure H funding, City HAP rounds 2 to 4, and Inside Safe. I can move on with my report, or if you want to, I can take questions here.
Do colleagues have questions so far?
Thanks, Janine. So I appreciate that you're trying to diagnose the problem, because I think one of the problems that we've faced for many years is that the problem is never adequately diagnosed, so we don't know how to fix it. And a lot of times I do blame LASA for that. It's miscommunication. Typically, I've attributed that to you wanting to protect your funders, because used to, we would get mad at LASA for not paying the providers who are in dire straits, and you wouldn't just honestly, transparently say, our funders haven't paid us. Well, we understand why. They're your funders. This is exactly why we have said for a long time the structure of LASA doesn't work. How are you supposed to administer funding for people who won't pay you? So then you don't pay providers, and then you protect them so the providers don't get paid and can't do the services for the people we're all mandated to serve. But then we can never actually fix it, because we don't actually know the truth of what's broken. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you speaking to some of the problem diagnosis. I think your analysis was lacking in some context and borderline, potentially a little bit misleading in what you've refused to include, which to me is a pattern. So number one, of course, county department coming, we've pulled our dollars out, great impact on LASA. We expected that in the April 1st motion. And so we told the county to be prepared to offer LASA additional support. You were offered said support by 24 staff, well-trained staff, who nevertheless would have to be trained by LASA to help you. But my understanding is they were brought in to help with the contracts. They have not been allowed, you have not requested any additional support or staffing to help you process the checks that are needing to get out as a result of all the contracts being executed. So that I don't understand. I understand, as you've said to me, well, we'd have to train them. Yes, that could take a week and it would slow things up, but then you'd have all this added capacity to get all these checks out. So tell me why that isn't a value add.
I think that the processes happening in the finance department are a lot more complex in nature than they are in the contracting unit. in my opinion, it was a lot easier to train the staff to execute contracts, as they were working mostly with one document, which they populated with different figures. It was logistically very simple, actually. The finance department is a lot more complex. We have a very
I heard
complex.
you say you're bringing on temps. How would temps be different than county staff? That wouldn't cost you anything.
That is a good point. I feel we would have more latitude with temps, honestly. There was a limitation to the county support that we encountered, which
Yes,
was
it can't
that they
help with the
could-
city.
which they couldn't help the city.
Right,
So
but we want all
that-
the county dollars
that-
out. So it would have helped with that.
I understand. It would have created more hurdles at this point that I think would have further slowed down the process.
Okay. For the record, I disagree with that assessment. And I think the providers would as well, because I mean, I know I'm coming at you with a lot right now. I have gotten, as I'm sure you have, countless calls. Like, it cannot be overstated. I have gotten calls from very large providers who have said, we will close. They don't want to say that publicly because they don't want to scare their staff, and they will do everything they can not to close. They have maxed out their lines of credit. There's no more rocks to turn over. Vendors are walking off jobs. And most egregiously, if you ask me, they can't bill for the interest they have to pay on their lines of credit. It's not a billable expense. I personally am going to ask for something to be fixed on that at the county, because I think it's in the six figures for some of them per month. They have so much line of credit, and then we make them fundraise to pay for that. So I am supercharged right now. I also don't understand where Geeta is. She said she would be here. You should not be taking all of this. This should be directed at the CEO. Does anyone know where Geeta is? I don't know where she is because she said she would be here. That is another massive hit on her, quite frankly. And I apologize to you, Janine, that you're taking all of this. And I thank you for that. Okay, but I do have to ask a couple more questions. When you're talking about one of the issues, again, there's three issues from what I see. So there's number one, which is you don't get all your money to pay people. So that is the part of the story that I feel like you don't totally tell. So yes, your capacity is impacted by the new department. We offered staff, they're not being taken. Okay. What you don't say is, I mean, you kind of mention it. How is it not a humongous problem that providers are submitting invoices for work they've completed for the city of Los Angeles, and you don't have that money, and you are not calling out that as a 911? That feels like a 911 to me.
I have to disagree, because since I've been sitting in this seat and where I have appeared in public spaces, particularly with service providers, as well as the messaging that is happening within the organization being communicated to service providers, we have stated that we do not have the funds, particularly from the city.
Yeah.
We have stated that.
When you lead, though, it feels like the messaging often is about like loss is undergoing the greatest transition. True.
Sure.
This is a massive change. But you at least have like the money to be paid on the county contracts you have, and the providers still aren't paid. The money to be paid on the city contracts, you don't even have to pay. Correct?
Correct. And when we sent out our last communication to service providers last week, it clearly stated the areas in which we did not have the funding to pay service providers.
Yeah.
And again, I did state that very specifically in this month's service provider meeting.
Yeah, no, I saw the letter. I think though, okay, so let me just ask some details because I think it's important. So you were talking about the measure. Okay, so when the providers had the big 911 in 24 and came to the Board of Supervisors, where we are happy they continue to come and advocate, we would encourage them to do the same at City Council. but nevertheless, they came to the board and said, and we invited them on the dais, and they did a presentation to the supervisors and said, this has to change. We need advances. So we very quickly changed that model. We started doing the advances. So what you were saying today is the providers haven't been getting the advances. And I heard two reasons. Number one, you said LAHSA staff elevated concerns about something. I didn't write a lot of notes about it. So maybe you can explain. It sounds to me, if I understand correctly, LAHSA made a unilateral decision not to release the advances for January and February based on concerns staff had talked about internally, not with the county.
Our staff had raised concerns about the recoupment of advances that had already gone out. So when we issue advances, we then have to perform recoupment on those advances against the actuals that get paid. So at this time, as we're leading into Q3, the outstanding balance of those advances was quite large, which raised some concerns regarding the ability to recoup that at the end of the year. So there were concerns raised, and which led to a slowdown in the issuance of the advances as that team figured out what they should do about that. Unfortunately, that caused delays, which bled into February. And at that point, we were delayed, and I had to communicate to the county where we were on February advances. As a result, we are paying February advances very late in the month, and also executing the recoupment of those advances, which is a administratively, I wouldn't say complex task, but I'd say it's a time consuming task to perform that recoupment across, as I said, 920 separate contracts that are submitting for invoicing.
So I asked, I thank you for that. So I see that. So do you want to do the process differently? Because I know this process was built in partnership with LAHSA in 24.
I would want to think about how that process can go better. I think that monthly advances was a great way to help service providers with their cash flow needs. But I think that the labor required to perform that recoupment is administratively burdensome.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's see. So then let me just make sure I was writing down notes as you were, and I want to make sure I'm very clear. When you talked about not having, I think it was Measure H funding, you were saying because it sits in an interest-bearing account at the county, and so you have to request that. How does that process typically work?
That's for Measure A.
Measure A. Okay.
The process works. LAHSA requests funds from the county, and they are deposited into an interest-bearing account held by the county.
Mm-hmm.
LAHSA then has to issue a memo to request approval of withdrawal of those funds. We submit that to the county auditor. When that is approved, they can then transfer the funds to LAHSA via ACH. Okay. So that could take the process of approval plus the process to have the funds transferred by the bank takes sometimes up to 10 business days.
So typically then you request that, this is what's accounting for the advances. Like that, those dollars pay the advances, right?
This is what is accounting for the delay in releasing the Measure A funding that we currently, the invoices that we have against Measure A plus the advances.
I don't want to just harp on this. I don't understand how you didn't request the dollars. It was just a mistake.
It was a mistake and an oversight in timing. Yes.
I want to ask you a question because it just seems like, and you kind of explained this at the beginning, LAHSA is just totally overwhelmed. Because it feels like I've seen evidence of providers who've submitted invoices. I know you have the dollars
Mhm.
and they're being told the goal would be for them to start getting money next Friday. I actually don't understand how providers can't make their payroll. You have money to pay them, but you can't get them a check. Like, just tell me what that, I don't understand. I genuinely am not trying to be an
actually
ass. I
don't have the
understand.
figures of what we have released in the past 2 weeks. I will be able to provide that. I came prepared with what was currently in payables now and aging, but we have released a significant amount of funds since this crisis has unfolded.
Okay, last question from me. When you release money to a provider, because they're providing me updates on the money you're sending, and like one of them got a check, I think, for $60,000 yesterday, and they're owed a lot more. Why only, like, if you're processing something for them and you have the money, why would they not, if you're able to focus on that provider and their contracts, why would they get such a small amount of a large amount owed instead of just like getting through their money and getting their check to them?
The only reason why we wouldn't pay on any service providers payable would be due to we either do not have the cash or there are other extenuating circumstances having to do with the funder. So in the case of some, the payables that get released are the payables for the cash that we do have on hand. And if there, as I said, any other extenuating circumstances, we cannot release those payments. This is every service provider has many different streams of funding mixed in to their payables. So it can't be that we cannot use the cash we have on hand to pay their other payables. We can only release it for the specific funding sources that can be released at that time.
Mm-hmm. But you have county dollars on contracts that you're not paying. They have invoiced, they are waiting, they can't pay their bills, you have the money. Like, just answer that. Like, don't give me any other context.
We have the cash in hand and we are getting it out the door. That just around the 20 million that we had drawn down from the interest bearing account is now flowing. And we will start to see those payments coming through today and until this issue is resolved.
One of the providers said to me that they get a notification from you that a transfer will happen, and it's like 5 days before they're actually going to see the money. Mm-hmm. Is this familiar to you? I don't know about this.
I'm not sure about that. I do know that ACH systems have the ability to let someone know when an ACH has been initiated. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that is what happens when we initiate the ACH, that they get automatically alerted.
Because I think some of them are, because they're hearing you say you're going to pay, but they're saying they can't pay us because we don't have, like, there's no way we're getting money today because we haven't gotten that alert, and they always get it days before.
I see. There could be an issue of timing of when the check selection process happens and the approval is making its way through the finance department.
And when do you plan on paying? Will the March advances be advanced?
The March advances will likely hit service providers in the first few days of March.
Okay. Thank you, Diego.
Well, thank you. Many of my questions are already asked, so I'll save some of my questions for the next item in the agenda. Just want to start by thanking you for the report as well. And I don't want to gloss over the emotional impact of this transition has on staff, right? So wearing my other hat for a second as a mental health professional and trying to be trauma informed, I understand the weight of morale and uncertainty has on staff. So just want to recognize that. And I do appreciate the acknowledgement of the issues, right? The chronic issues, but the reality is this is not the first time. Yeah. And while, yes, the delay may be unprecedented in terms of, the length of the delay, it is a recurring issue. So I really appreciate the effort of bringing an external consultant to do a forensics analysis of LASA's financial accounting. to identify the contributors, right, to this issue. That said, I think we need to hold ourselves to the same standards that we hold our providers, right? So the information given today, it would be very helpful to have that information as an actual report, to be able to see it and receive, this is the total owed, this is the total paid today, this is the total, besides, of course, the report that's been given verbally.
Sure.
At minimum, we should have an actual corrective plan to deal with this issue, right? So with clear timelines for when do we expect, and I understand there are many factors that might interfere with it, but when do we expect payments to be made? When do we expect the individuals that are being trained right now to start supporting, right, the reimbursement process? When do we, how would these efficiency measures going to be institutionalized, right? Like, so you spoke about training, for example. What is the length? What type of training? So just more granular information so we have a better understanding of what's being done besides what's aspirational to tackle these issues. And I understand that's a lot to put together in a time of crisis as you're responding, right, to this emerging problem. But given that it is recurring, right, hopefully it will serve as a blueprint for similar challenges in the future, right, if there are cash flow issues in the future. No. But I'll save my other questions for the next.
Thank you. And I just wanted to lift up, didn't you mention that there was going to be some dashboards and sort of policies that were going to be updated as you all were moving through this update and the training and things like that? Didn't I hear you mention that there were going to be some sort of policies updated or created
in
as
past? Or did I mention that in my report here? I did
thought
mention
you
that today.
did.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Similar to what we implemented in the contract unit, we are implementing dashboards that can more easily display and analyze the data for staff to be able to make faster decisions on what cash we have on hand and identify the invoices that we're able to pay based on what we have on hand. We do have access to that now, of course, through various reports. It's just when you put it through a tool like Smartsheets, you're able to plug in those reports that will provide you with like visual data. It can also automate workflows and be able to track different items that need to happen in order to release a payment.
Why I can't say enough. I really appreciate the work that's being done. We're in a very, the joke is that we're tired of unprecedented times. We would like some normalcy to come back. But I recognize that there's an incredible lift that's happening. There are issues that are unforeseen, and we're trying to build the plane, fly it as, you know, airport hubs are changing, all these things. So I appreciate the efforts to continue to have folks updated. I appreciate that, you know, you all continuously respond to the questions and feedbacks that we lift up here. So I just want to acknowledge your responsiveness. And even if there's a question that, you know, you might not have in the moment, you're always able to provide us that information. So appreciate the effort. I know it's not easy. And let's continue to agenda item number 3.
There is a longer.
Oh, there's more. Okay. Okay, here we go.
Not as interesting as what we've covered here. So I will kind of go through it as quickly as possible. Okay. I'm providing an update on LASA's current active audits. We are currently amidst our annual single audit for fiscal year 24-25. We are targeting, we aim to complete the audit within the next 2 weeks. Third-party audits in process include the Department of Aging and Disabilities Home Safe Program Financial and Compliance Audit, the Department of Public Social Services Coordinated Entry System for Families Program Financial and Compliance Audit. This is being conducted by a CPA firm BCA Watson. On to the next item, which is our funding update. Our FY 26-27 city budget request update. The city's budget hearing for LAHSA's fiscal year 26-27 request is next Wednesday on February 25th. This hearing is scheduled over 2 months earlier than it occurred last year. So we have a really great hope that contracting we will be able to know what will be funded, and we can expect improved timelines with the city and get those contracts executed a lot earlier than we did this year. There are no significant updates to the HAP 6 funding, except to say that we have not yet received our contract and we still await funding from HAP 6. On the federal side, we have the HUD COC NOFO. So there's a lot to update here and a lot of good news. As presented at the Program and Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday, February 18th, there have been a lot of positive developments in the COC NOFO process. LAHSA submitted its application by the February 9th deadline, and HUD is currently evaluating submissions under the previously established more favorable NOFO rules. HUD expects to announce COC selections by late March 2026. As long as the injunction remains in place at that time, all projects must be evaluated under the prior NOFO rules, which under the majority of renewal projects are expected to be approved. Recent federal legislation, the February 3 Appropriation Act, provides important protections for this period of uncertainty. The act guarantees that all projects with grant terms ending January, February, and March 2026 will be renewed for a 12-month term, immediately and non-competitively, regardless of which NOFO rules HUD ultimately applies. The legislation further ensures that if HUD hasn't made any awards by April 1st, all projects expiring April, May, and June will also receive automatic renewal. And these protections extend to subsequent quarters if HUD continues to delay any selections beyond the future target dates. And that concludes my report.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the good news on the
Yeah, we need
for
it.
sure.
Needs
I just have one question, and perhaps I missed it, but you said that the single audit will be completed within the next 2 weeks. Is that the preparation for the audit, or will we have the audit report within the next 2 weeks?
Let's see. The report is scheduled to enter the auditor's detailed review phase in the first week of March, followed by the principal review and the final quality review by March 15th.
By March 1st, okay.
Yeah.
Janine, when you quickly mentioned a family CES audit, is that an audit on past performance or expenditure? Or because I know that whole system is pretty decimated right now with the funding reductions, but that's not what it's being. It just like, are you just auditing the program?
I need to get more details about that one. If John, do you have any details about what the DPSS audit is covering?
Yeah, John Campo, Senior Advisor to CFO. The DPSS audit is covering the Coordinated Entry System for Families program. The audit's looking at fiscal year 24-25. DPSS annually personally conducts 2 semi-annual monitorings. Those monitoring reports cover, it's a financial review. It's also a compliance review, contract compliance review. Those 2 reviews were already completed last year. In addition to that, DPSS has engaged a private CPA firm, BCA Watson, who the county has used before for our Measure H audit. And BCA Watson will be conducting this audit, which it seems a little duplicative because the areas of the audit are almost exactly the same as what DPSS was looking at, but DPSS likes to have an additional audit at the end of the grant because their grants are multi-years. So they've done this usually at the end. Oh, and the last year of the grant, they usually bring in a private CPA firm.
Okay, thank you, John.
Sure.
Any other questions in the report?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So now we're going to agenda item 3.
That is also me. I'll just do it from the desk. Unless you want me to stand there. Item number 3 is to request for approval of the revised Finance Committee Charter. Item 3 on your agenda today is requesting approval of the revised charter. We have updated the charter, specifically the reporting schedule, to better align with Governmental Accounting Standards Board's principle and Government Finance Officers Association best practices. The revised charter specifies that the Finance Committee will meet quarterly and no fewer than 4 times per year. Compared with the current monthly schedule, quarterly reporting provides greater decision-making usefulness, increased reliability, completeness, and accuracy, improved trend analysis, reduced risk of misinterpretation, and lower cost and administrative burden. We require your approval.
Okay, so I get started. So I had a few questions and concerns, and now I have many more considering the report, the earlier report, right? So to bring this proposed change to the charter this week of all weeks, to me is quite troubling, actually. Not going to dispute the rationale, and I understand that may also be related to staffing. Time. That said, reducing the meetings, right, the required meetings in half, and transitioning from financial statements to financial reports could create all types of vulnerabilities, right? And you know this a lot better than I do. So for emerging crises like the payment delays, for example, there would be greater lag in between meetings. So the assertion that, fewer meetings and the reports instead of the statements might help with decision-making, I strongly disagree with that. I also think it would be detrimental in terms of public perception. In times of crisis, that's when we need to hold together and increase transparency and be able to have the information on a timely manner to address the cash flow issues, the restructuring efforts. So if anything, oversight needs to be strengthened, not reduced. I do not support transitioning from financial statements to reports, even if we cut the frequency of meetings in half. If we go from a minimum of 8 to 4, I would strongly recommend that we keep the financial statements submissions monthly. And if we decide for whatever reason to adopt these changes, and the committee will now receive only quarterly reports, a monthly statement should still be provided to the committee's chair. I think that's like baseline level of access to information that we would require to be able to make well-informed decisions. If the goal is to free up the CFO's time, or if there's a staffing issue, I'll wait. No, please.
Because we can still meet with more frequency. This is just the level. So I think if there is a crisis that we could.
I
maybe-
understand. I
Okay.
still strongly disagree with that. So see if the issue is to free up the CFO's time as you're looking into staffing plans, you could have a designated financial reporting lead, right? And you could assign that to one of your team members as a senior preparer for financial reports / statements, right? I don't quite understand why we would transition from statements to reports when for any organization, I run a nonprofit, so having financial statements is like the, you know, very, very basic standard for not just the financial team, but the administrative team as a whole to make decisions, right? So if, once again, if we adopt a different approach to the meetings frequency, I would still like to see the financial statements to be circulated monthly and at a minimum for the financial statements to be provided to the chair. I have a couple of other questions, but I would like to hear the response of,
Sure. John Campos, Senior Advisor to CFO. Of course, you're free to deny this request, but I didn't want it to be for maybe misinterpreting one word that was crossed out. So as you noted, the word statement was crossed out. That does not change anything about our reports. Statements is a specific term that applies to our annual balance sheet, our annual statement of revenues, expenditures, fund balance, the government-wide. Those are controlled by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They're very precise. There's no way out of those. Those are being audited right now. They have been under audit for over a month. Those are going to be uploaded to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse on the 31st. We just wanted to be clear that a budget versus actual report, which is usually the first report that we present, is not a financial statement. It's a report. A report on the cash balances, the APs, the ARs. Those are from a financial statement that's called a balance sheet, but that report is not a financial statement. So we just differentiate between the statements that are the required statements for a government that are done annually versus interim reports. And our interim reports, we're doing them monthly. We can continue to do them monthly. However, when we do our reports monthly, and we'll just start with July, before LAHSA can do a monthly report on the first month of the year, we have to wait for our providers to invoice us. So we can't give you a July monthly report on July 31st or 30th. So now we're into August. On August 15th, we're going to receive their invoices. We still can't give you that report at the end of August because we have a small portion of the invoices. By the time we have enough of the invoices to give you a report that has enough data for you to use it to make decisions, we're in September. And so that's our schedule right now. We're just 2 months behind all the time. What that means is the most updated month that we're constantly reporting on is very incomplete data. I wouldn't want anyone to make a decision thinking that there's a trend, thinking that that's underspent. It's very incomplete. And in financial reporting, the key to financial reporting is it has to be useful for decision making. For it to be useful for decision making, it has to be complete as possible. They're not complete unless they're audited financial statements. But a quarterly report, 2 out of 3 of those months are substantially complete. Not fully complete, substantially complete. And so as far as the total completeness, the accuracy, the reliability of it, it's all increased. Additionally, HUD, for most federal programs, limits financial reporting to no more than quarterly. The county reports Measure H financial reports quarterly. Many COCs, only annual. we're not aware of too many that report monthly. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be internal. This is strictly our external reports. We're talking about doing it quarterly so that you have more meaningful reports and the trends are actually something you can rely on and make decisions. But for our internal reports, daily, we're looking at cash payables and receivables. We're also looking at reports weekly and monthly. And that analysis never stops, has nothing to do with the reports that we share externally. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that we're not changing the content. We didn't used to present statements, and now we're presenting reports. We've always presented reports. Statements was in there. I noticed it wasn't right. The only time you're going to see our statements is when we come next month with the single audit package. So just want to make sure if you make the decision with having the facts, and of course we can keep it monthly if everybody wants to see us that much.
May I just respond to that? Yeah. So thank you very much. Much appreciate the explanation, the context. And yes, I understand the distinction. However, in the charter, it did state statements, right? And to date, I agree, I haven't seen a actual statement. We have seen reports.
Yeah.
And how can I put this? Not going to dispute how challenging it is to be working on incomplete reports and or the potential for misunderstanding the data if we're looking at something that is 30, 60 days old, right? I agree with that notion. But to me, at least, if we're being asked to make well-informed decisions and provide recommendations on the LASA's financial health, right? For me, at least, some data is better than no data at all. And if we have to wait for quarterly reports, even if there is an opportunity for special meetings or for as a crisis arises, not having just an overall sense of where we are at any given month is problematic as a financial committee. So if we are going to make this change to the charter, I would once again recommend that the financial report should be still provided to the chair monthly. So giving her the opportunity to call in a special meeting or to let us know if there are issues that we need to look at. I hear what you're saying, and I understand again, especially now, why that might make sense because of the amount of work and time that goes into the preparation of this information. But I believe that now calls for what we're going through, calls for just greater oversight. And greater oversight to me does not translate into less frequent meetings or, the changing cadence of reports.
Commissioner Rodriguez, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Considering what you have said and the crisis that we are in right now, I would like to withdraw the request for approval to change the charter.
Thanks. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, Janine.
All right. We'll go to our financial reports. Thank you for the clarification. I do just want to say before we completely move over, hopefully we can come back maybe in a 6 months time or as a next, just to sort of check in, because I do think it's important for our charter to be reflective of what we're actually doing as a body. And if the term of art or whatever we're referencing does not in fact reflect, what's happening, I want to make sure that that's that the language is consistent and reflective of what we're doing. So hopefully we can come back maybe in about 6 months when things have calmed down and check in on this. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, good morning. Christina Hill, Finance Director. I know it's been mentioned several times, but I do just want to highlight how much we appreciate the partnership and support of the board. And Commissioner Perkins, you mentioned about LAHSA being overwhelmed, and in addition to all of our daily, and you acknowledging definitely the mental toll that is taking. And I just want to acknowledge publicly that, you know, many of we're working 12, 13-hour days. And I know that the request is always for more. And, you know, in addition, we're having the RPAs that are happening constantly. We only have a finite number of folks. And they're a very dedicated bunch for sure. But we're all human, and we're here because we care. And so we are trying to figure out a path forward that works, that we can support the staff so that we can best support our unhoused neighbors and the community. So I just wanted to raise that up here publicly. In addition, today, we're going to start, in that, without, you know, Janine mentioned it, but we have critical folks leaving that don't have other jobs, but they're just saying they can't handle the stress. So in this job market, that's just context for what we're dealing with.
I'm sorry, I just have to say something because
Sure.
I know it looks, thank you, Gita, for coming. Janine is heroic, working constantly. I think you've brought an incredible amount of oversight. I think some of the things we're seeing that are slowing down because you're bringing compliance. And so for a system that is operated without that level of oversight, it slows things up as you build that out. I want to honor all of that. I do wish you'd been here, Gita, because I feel like Janine was sort of on her own,
Yes.
and I was very critical.
I'm terribly sorry. It did not update on my calendar that this meeting was earlier than 9. It's
Okay.
still on my phone as 9. So I'm really sorry. I was on time for 9 o'clock, completely late for 8:30, and I meant to be here to support.
Okay.
We'll talk to you individually after as well.
No, you're very available. I just felt badly for Janine. So, but I want to honor everything that you're saying. The staff at LAHSA is incredible. I know the people that are still here are here because they care. What you're hearing from me is the same is true of the providers who are also losing staff every day, who cannot pay their bills, whose executive directors are tough as nails, and I have watched cry. I think they will get ulcers. One of them called me one Sunday and said, do you think I should go to Costco and get toilet paper because my vendor won't come? Security has walked off sites. So I get it, like it is, but this is part of why we don't think LAHSA works. You are an intermediary for a broken system. We don't want the system to be broken. We made the fiscal and programmatic decision to start the department because you are handcuffed in how well you can perform. So this is not about the staff at LAHSA, but you do take the brunt of it because you're the intermediary at this point.
Sure.
Next year, from my perspective, I'll be directing all of this at the county, and the county has historically paid on time. And that's one of the reasons, you know, it's how do we even monitor the performance of the providers? We always talk about this. We don't pay them. We don't get to say one thing about how they're working. They're CPOs or program people. They spend their days chasing money for work they've already done months ago. So I know it's unfair that Janine takes all this, but I also, part of what I'm seeking to do is we have to expose the barriers, because often it does feel like it gets lost in a lot of words that sound really good. But if we don't expose, the city isn't paying. LAHSA didn't ask for the dollars. If it's the county, say it. I will not protect them. But we have to expose the problem or we're never going to fix it. And so that's what you're hearing from me. Not that LAHSA staff doesn't work hard, but equally as impacted are the providers. And when they're impacted, people die. Like, this isn't a game. So that's what you're hearing from me.
Sure. And we definitely are sympathetic to the plight. And I think collectively look at us as a team, right? And we are hustling, you know, to get them paid as quickly as we can. And So we're having those conversations with them as well. They're calling us on the weekends and we're talking to them as well. So it's not that we're not sympathetic to the plight, and we are, like you're saying, we're looking at systems. Janine and myself and the controller, we're new, so we are looking at ways that we can improve the system. So I just want to, I definitely understand where you're saying, and just also acknowledging the work that is happening and the people that are trying to make things better. And with that said, today we're going to start, there's going to be, from time to time, we're going to bring forth other staff so you can get an opportunity to meet folks who are participating, doing the powerful work. And it's also part of our commitment to cross-train and train our staff, give them an opportunity. And like my dad always said, experience is the only teacher. So with that said, I would like to bring forth our manager, Stephanie, who will, budget and financial planning manager, who will be bringing forth the budget to actuals for you today. Stephanie.
Good morning, commissioners. As Christina so kindly introduced me, my name is Stephanie Okolo, Manager of Budget and Financial Planning here at LAHSA, and I will be presenting today's budget versus actuals through December 31st of 2025. So to begin, our 2025 through 2026 approved budget was adopted by Commission in July of 2025. At adoption, the total fiscal year budget was $828.6 million, of which LAHSA's admin budget comprised 5.4%, LAHSA Direct Program at 10.4%, and service provider comprised 84.2%. Just to note, we will be bringing our mid-year financial status update to March Finance Commission and reporting actuals through January of 2026. At that time, we'll also be showing adjustments and truing up any carryover. For example, our city housing and homelessness report adjustments, as well as any Board of Supervisors supplemental budget adjustments as approved. Next slide. So as mentioned, this report includes year-to-date budget and expenditures through December 31st of 2025. At this point in time, LAHSA's budget is approximately $414.3 million, tracking at about 50% of the total approved budget. Expenditures for the same period last year were about $290.4 million, or about 35%. So we are tracking just about in line with the total spend rate for this same period last year. Overall, LAHSA's admin spending is tracking at about 43%, direct program at 56%, and service provider at 34%, with 12 million still routing in invoices. In the subsequent slides, I'll review our admin and DP budget in detail. You'll note that service provider expenses are tracking below target just due to a now recently resolved delay in contract execution, as well as providers continuing to get caught up with prior month billing. So next slide. So through December 2025, the LAHSA admin budget totaled approximately $22.2 million, representing about 50% of the approved annual budget, while expenditures for the same period were approximately $18.9 million, or 43% of the total budget. A few items to note for our personnel expenditures. As Janine mentioned, we do continue to face staff turnover, and we've supplemented many key support positions with temporary staff across the agency. This fiscal year, we did actually decrease our temp budget overall, resulting in billing temporary staff against any vacant budgeted positions we do have. For our office technology line, it's trailing a bit just due to the timing of how we've received our invoices. We did recently receive a $300,000 licensing invoice for our grants management system, and there are pending invoices for any future enhancements on that system as well. This fiscal year, our HMIS software BitFocus was actually supported by county funding as well as by federal HMIS underspend only through Q3. We do expect that this will transition to LASA admin in Q4. You can go back to the slide, I think. So there's also, just to mention, for our PSAs and travel and training, those are trending quite low just because leadership does continue to review these on an ongoing basis to make sure that only essential items are approved. For our contracts, we have making sure that there's no overcommitment of these contracts across fiscal years. And with travel and training, that's just reviewed on a rolling basis as we assess our economic outlook. Next slide. So this depicts losses admin across our two main admin subcategories. So for rehousing system administration, this is inclusive of our contracting, grants management, and any payment reimbursement processing we have. For infrastructure and internal services, this is inclusive of fixed non-personnel costs and any support departments such as HR, IT, etc. Next slide. So this includes our actuals across various LASA run programs. While some programs do appear to be spending high compared to their year-to-date budget, again, I will reiterate that we will be bringing an adjusted budget to our March committee, and that will capture any supplemental increases that were awarded by the county, either through their supplemental budget process or through the unappropriated balance. Another item to note here is master leasing. It's tracking right now at about 62%, but we are projecting that there will be a deficit of approximately 4 million. We're actively reviewing and, in a coordination with our fiscal agent and our funders to request a budget modification if needed for any unallocated funds that would be able to bridge that gap. All other programs appear to be on track. One item to note is that we did conduct our annual homeless count in January of this year. Last year it occurred in February, so that resulted in a slight year-over-year expenditure variance. We are still expecting that a majority of expenses will be incurred in Q4, especially we have a large USC contract that usually comes in that final quarter. And then for capacity building, we did right size it in this fiscal year. Last fiscal year included a multi-year budget. However, again, as we continue to assess our economic outlook, we did repurpose those funds to support time-limited subsidy. Okay, I'll pause here for questions.
Any questions from my colleagues?
Thank you so much. I just am asking a question on this last slide, slide 7. It shows problem solving includes financial assistance. Last year at this point, 65% spent. This year, 49% spent. It's not fully expended. Can you say more about that? It's just such a critical program and we only hear people want more of it, but it's not fully expended right now. And I feel like people are being told it's closed. I think it's hard to get problem solving right now.
Good morning. Good morning. Enrique Olguin, Associate Director of Budgets and Financial Planning. So for problem solving in particular, this line item is supported by our LASA State HAP. We have communicated with the program staff and to ensure they're monitoring their budget and the financial assistance that we are paying from our in-house team. That needs to be in alignment with the budget. So it is on track. It is currently at 49% with the budget being, we are reporting through December, so it's 50%. They need to end the year on target. We know our state HAP is facing deficits and we had to, like Stephanie alluded to, this fiscal year, the bulk lion's share of our state HAP dollars was repurposed and earmarked for the vouchers, time limited subsidy. And so your question, Commissioner Perkins, is regarding why isn't
it says here there are problem solving dollars available. When people try to refer to problem solving, they're told by the contracted providers that there's no funding available. That's my question.
This slide reflects the in-house problem solving funds that we are managing and tracking. This is not. the
So people
funding
could
that-
reach out to LASA and ask for problem solving and there's money so they could connect clients to it?
There's technical assistance that the solving team has in coordination with.
I'm talking
various
about the
contractors.
financial assistance. It says includes financial assistance.
Correct. That $2.3 million includes staffing and in-house financial assistance. So if providers have tapped out of and do not have exhausted their financial assistance funds that they have contracted with LASA, they can coordinate with the LASA in-house with their leads and program leads at LASA.
Okay, okay, cool. Questions on, you talked about master leasing, that it's going to have a $4.6 million deficit. That's huge. I want to understand that. And then you mentioned talking to your funders. What it says here is LASA's consulting with our county partners. So I am curious what all your funders are interested in doing to help cover that gap, which is significant,
Yes.
problematic.
So master leasing, we have had internal meetings with the program staff and the program leads and our fiscal agent, whom is tracking the operating expenses. A couple items to note that the fiscal agent informed LASA, there are clients that do not have vouchers. And so the problem, the model of master leasing is that if there are filled units, to my understanding, the clients should have vouchers that will come in as revenue and will be paid to the master leasing fiscal agent.
No, every person who came to master leasing didn't have a voucher. They should have had a rental subsidy of some kind. So
Correct.
you're saying that they might have had a time limited subsidy or a voucher, but in fact, LASA's program placed people in master leasing units with no subsidy?
I would have to defer to our program.
This is an important question. This is a humongous deficit in a program that was poorly designed from my assessment, and this seems to confirm it. So I think we need more of an update on that.
We'll provide you with that information.
Thanks, Janine. And then also here it says outreach and access, mid-year budget increase approved by the county addressed outreach funding gaps, while city unappropriated balance funds are still pending incorporation into the funder agreement. Say those words in words I understand. Because it sounds to me like the city hasn't paid again, so the county has given you more money.
No, so the process, so to clarify that note, it's the county there are gaps from the outreach teams that LASA currently has that were directed from the county. Part of those gaps were addressed as a part of the county's supplemental budget process.
Let me stop you there. So you're saying the county asked you to hire outreach teams and they didn't give you enough money for the county funded
There were
teams?
gaps, correct.
Okay, that's not my understanding, but continue.
As a part of the supplemental budget process, there were dollars that were awarded for outreach. So we were operating county funded outreach teams, and there were gaps that were filled as a part of the county's supplemental budget process.
And tell me more about for the city's outreach teams.
So when we sent the report, since then, there was a housing and homelessness committee that approved the remaining unappropriated balance funding for the city outreach teams. And that is, to my understanding, headed to full city council for approval.
And that will give you 3 months, or that'll give you through the fiscal year?
I believe it's the fiscal year. It would be the second half of the fiscal year.
So okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. A question I have, because you are talking about admin funding. So as you look ahead to July 1st, let me see, what slide is this? Page 11 references this. So this is administrative overhead, if I'm understanding correctly. The share of the budget for the administration of LASA. That's what this is telling us about, right? On page, well, it's like slide 3, but it also has a page 11. It goes way back. Yeah. Wait, I think it may have been the first slide, actually. There we go. Is that it? Yeah, approved budget, and then it's administrative to the far left. So that's what keeps LASA running, right?
Yeah, administrative dollars, correct.
Okay, so I'm just curious how LASA is, well, first of all, you don't have the budget yet from the city. So what are y'all doing as the finance committee of the commission? 46% of your budget, your 46% of your budget comes from the county, but 8% of the admin and 4% from the city. And then you have your state and federal, very small, and you have some private. So what is LASA's plan to continue to operate with only city funds when their administrative fee is so low?
In our funding request, we have identified with the city the loss of our funding, which would require them to pay us a higher administrative rate than they have been historically.
Okay, so you'll know more once the thing happens. And then a question I have, since we're talking a little bit about city, in the last 12 months, has LASA paid any city contracts with county cash to providers?
No.
So, okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That's my thank you.
We're ready. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, wait, we're not doing the rest of the slides? Because if not, I have more questions. There's a lot in here. And also, if everyone, I'm getting texts that people can't hear. So if you can just speak into the mics.
We're working on it.
I do believe, like so, better. I do believe the remaining slides were just the appendices.
Oh, okay, I have some questions from them. So on page 30, it does summary expenditures by program department. And it shows that LASA is funding interim housing at 434 million and permanent housing at 195 million. I would like to see that broken out by funder. So if y'all can do that moving forward. So which funding streams fund the interim and the permanent? Does that already, do we have that information?
Reference the page.
I'm on page 30.
I believe it's the next presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was an appendix. I'll hold.
Any more questions on 4.1? Okay, all right. So 4.2. Then we'll be ready for you.
Like karaoke.
If it doesn't work, I'll speak directly into it.
Oh, it's 4.2. Okay.
Hi, good morning, commissioners. Please let me know if I'm not. Okay, perfect. Alejandro Gomez Palma. I'm with the Contract Performance and Compliance Department, which is a new department based on the restructuring in November of last year. And we are going to be focusing on the budget versus actuals, but this time on service providers for the period July through December 2025. Next slide, please. So in this context, it's an important milestone because July through December means Q1 and Q2, which is half of the fiscal year. So in this context, our year-to-date budget is 50%, which we would expect considering billing should have been submitted for those 6 months. And expenditure overall is 34%, which is exactly what it was at this same point in time for last fiscal year. What this represents significantly is that the significant delays in contracting we've caught up with that part, and the delays in billing caused by the delays in contracting have now been not completely resolved, but at least billing has caught up in that regard. In the first table, the summary expenditures by funder, I would draw the commissioner's attention to the 12.7 million of pending expenditures. And this figure are invoices that have been submitted to LASA, but that have not been formally processed, approved to become aging payables. This 12.7 million represents approximately a little over 200 invoices, the majority of which are for December, and 50% of those were submitted in the calendar week prior to this report. What this means is obviously billing is on track, and these invoices were submitted in January, primarily at the end of January, which tracks with what we would expect. Yeah. Okay. Okay, please let me know if the online participants are not able to hear me. Okay, in the next table where we have expenditure by program department, just a couple of significant items, interim housing and permanent housing, which have the largest budgets, are tracking above 30%, 39%, and 32%. Again, these are departments that oversee the programs of the service providers. They're not expenditure by the LASA admin staff, et cetera. Okay. And the summary expenditures by SPA, I would highlight just a couple of items. First of all, the county expenditure is tracking at 80%, which is comparable to last fiscal year. And this year, it is being driven by the fiscal agent that is providing TLS financial assistance on behalf of providers. And West LA, which is SPA 5, is tracking at 36%, which is the highest expenditure for this at this point in time. And the lowest is Antelope Valley and South Bay, SPA 1 and 8, for 24 and 23%. Next slide, please. So here, it's the same information broken out by funding source by the specific funders. Here, I would just cite 2 or 3 salient points. The first one is, if we look at the federal expenditure, I would draw the commissioner's attention to YHDP, which is a youth homelessness demonstration project. We are tracking lower than a comparable point in time last fiscal year. And this is primarily due to some delays that we had due to the need to add contract language that takes into consideration the larger context with HUD. We expect that to be resolved, and hopefully by the end of February, beginning of March, those contracts that are routing will be executed. And then, as in our prior report, State ERF and City Mayfair have expenditures, but there's no budget. The mid-year budget will be presented next report, and so you'll have an actual budget against those expenditures.
What do you mean there's no budget?
So if commissioners can look at the state ERF, we have expenditures for $610,000. But on the budget, there is no budget allocated because this is going to be presented in next report committee to be adopted.
So you have a budget?
There is a budget, but it hasn't formally been adopted by the committee, which it needs to be.
Which committee? I'm sorry.
The LASA committee.
I don't understand how you have expenditures and no budget.
Good morning, Enrique Olguin, Associate Director of Budgets and Financial Planning. This funding source, and the reason why it's not reflecting the budget here, there was a budget modification submitted to the state to ensure that initially this funding was supposed to be earmarked for master leasing. The need came through, I believe it's on rental assistance, and so that's why the expenses are not hitting here. It is a formality on bringing the revised budget, revised charts to as a part of the mid-year budget, but we are tracking and submitting those adjustments and being in alignment with our funder agreements and modifications to the state and the various funders. So it is a point in time when we come and true up the budget on these reports. That is what Alejandro's alluding to, us coming with the mid-year adjustments, showing any increases in revenue, shifts, budget modifications between programs. That is what we will be bringing to present to the public.
This is the kind of thing though, this is what I think what Diego was referencing before, when you think about transparency, and God knows I'm not a financial whiz. I do know when you have expenditures, you can see how this looks like it's not transparent. There's no budget. There's not even a guess. How do you know you can spend $610,000?
That is tracked internally. Those dollars are being captured in a different category in our reporting. It is the practice that we've been taking is adopting a budget in July, or as close as we can to July. At a midpoint, we are capturing internally with the funders, internal monitoring of where the various budget categories and where the funding is.
How much money are you allowed to spend? Shouldn't that be there? I'm sorry, I just don't get it. I don't get it. How do you not? I don't get it. It's just because you have to talk a lot before. Like, how do you know how much money did they give you to spend? Isn't that the budget?
This is solely showing the provider dollars at a point in time, the funding that was approved with this funding source for the providers. I can point you to a different slide where you will see the budget. We are tracking the budget Let me locate.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's irrelevant in some ways. It's a principle. You have to put a budget when you put expenditures. It's a public document. That's what people are looking at. I'm sorry. That just seems odd to me, but please.
Is it procedurally just because the budget that this is referencing is from July and that it will formally be updated at the mid-year for our next meeting?
That is correct. And
So
we
it's
did
just
try to address, so the commissioner's comment is well taken. We did try to address that with footnotes, but again, it's fine print. What we're indicating here, as Enrique alluded to, is for the state ERF, part of the direct program, part of LASA's funding is being shifted to service providers, and that is going to be presented. So the budget that is going to be shifted is 1.7 million. But formally, in terms of procedure, that mid-year budget has to be adopted formally by the LASA Commission. So it has to be presented, after which then that can formally become part of the budget. So we are.
So did we approve, I'm sorry, did we approve anything in July? Because I think this is something that we've been talking a lot at the county about this as we're prepping, like when money has been spent without an approved budget, that's actually considered problematic. Like, you shouldn't be spending if you don't have an approved budget. But that's just kind of how it has to happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Enrique Ogin, the budget was approved for this funding source. It was $1.7 million. That was approved by the commission in July. It is the way that we divvy up the reports. The first presentation that you saw, it's on the administrative dollars and the LASA run programs, homeless count, HMIS, the internal piece. Alejandro's reporting on the provider piece. When we came to the commission in July, we submitted $1.7 million for this funding source, and that was approved. Now the purpose of those dollars has changed. We assessed where the need was. The need was in rental assistance. So the funding shifted from internal master leasing operations, LASA run programs, to now the providers or clients, rental assistance.
So we approved, I think this is interesting too. LASA Commission approves budgets tied to programs, but then LASA can just decide to reallocate those funds to a different purpose. So that feels odd to me because that doesn't feel very transparent about how because you've publicly said we will use the dollars this way. So we assume those dollars are being used that way, and then we don't fund those things. But then if you decide on the back end, oh, we're going to use it for this now, and don't make that public, then how do your funders know how you're using the money that's been publicly approved?
It's not very different than any budget modification procedure in which you spend down the dollars and you see what is happening and where it is landing, and then you go to the funder and then request for the dollars to be modified in order for you to spend it that way. It is a very similar process that he is talking about here, in where we are seeing where the need is, where the actual need is, and that we are going to come to this body to request that budget be modified.
Just a clarification. You're going to ask for permission for the budget to be modified, or just for us to rectify the budget modification that already occurred? Because it sounds like the later.
Correct.
So you're essentially just asking us permission for a mod that has already theoretically happened and assumed for your actions for the mid.
From what the budget that was adopted in July.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, beat a dead horse there, but I think that's why so valuable for these type of conversations. There are footnotes. This is just a kind of perhaps a reporting omission, like that, and it would be extremely difficult for you to add footnotes for all the budget bots, right? And I understand that, but if there's a way then for it to reflect at least what was originally approved,
sure,
in future reports, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
I think this is what's so hard when you sit on something like the commission, because we're just talking about money, but the way the money's used is everything. So if those decisions to change the programmatic goal are made behind closed doors, it feels like we need to seek a way to make that more public, because that's a huge thing. I often hear rumors like, oh, these vouchers came for this and now they've decided they're going to use them at this motel or something. So I don't know. It doesn't feel transparent. And this is the issue. And then what are we holding accountable? Because we don't really know how the program operates. We know how much money is being spent, but we don't know on what. So like a budget modification, if it's in fact a programmatic modification, that's different. If how you're using the money changes, that's important, I think.
No, absolutely. So just a couple of points. So in prior finance committee meetings, we did have a column that said pending approval. So we would actually include those things that were in process, not formally approved, but that we could see the dollar amount that is being shifted.
Is it just money, or is it the way you're using the money?
So that's a good point. So if the money is visibly presented in terms of being shifted as budget modifications, in this particular case for state ERF, it was, just to cite an example, direct program that LASA internally had the budget for, and then we are shifting it to service providers because after 4 or 5 months, it was clearly articulated that the need was really for rental assistance. And so the service providers needed that budget more than what was internally being implemented by LASA. That's just one example. So having the money isn't everything, but it'll, as you know, if you have visibility on those pending budget modifications, budgets, then the question is, okay, well, why was this being shifted? And then that discussion should happen.
So are you making sure then whenever you do those budget mods, do you come back up to your summary expenditures by would that impact the program department? Like, let's say, I don't know how the dollars were being used before, but now you're using them for PH, it sounds like. So I'm just curious if you're making sure that all your programmatic intention of your dollars aligns with that chart from the previous summary expenditures by program department. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right, exactly. And so that's a good point. And I think we'll work with LASA leadership to see if we need to modify it. Just an example. So if you look at the 25-26 budget for service providers, it's 697,000.6 million, right? Just to cite an example. Were we to have added the budget that is being shifted in the state ERF, this figure would go up by 1.7 million, in which case we would be out of alignment with what was formally approved in July as the budget for service providers. We would see the offset obviously in LASA's direct program, but we formally haven't received that approval presented at commission. So it is a procedural, it is procedurally to make sure that it's transparent at the same time following the process for budget adoption. But your comments are noted, commissioners, and I think in addition to footnotes, I think moving forward, we can add more information on those specific cases where there are budget modifications or additional budget is being approved. Okay, next slide, please. So here, this slide, there's a lot of information. I would draw your commissioner's attention to the column that says fiscal year 25-26. That represents 35 million of annual advances. And this ties to a little of what our deputy CFO was presenting. So as the date of this report, we have $35 million worth of advances still issued to service providers. This represents an increase from our last report in January of 7.2 million, primarily driven by the city and county advances issued to service providers. And again, this tracks with the fact that the last group of contracts were executed in December, some in January. And so the advances for those contracts, similar to the billing, would become current. So it does track that we are increasing, we are seeing the balance of annual advances increase. What we should see now in Q3, Q4 is that annual advance balance actually start to decrease as service providers recoup that through their billing.
Have y'all done full reconciliation for Q1 and Q2 so they know what they owe?
That's exactly what that's exactly part of the process that we're doing jointly between the departments. And that is also why the advances that were issued for February also included that reconciliation process.
So I'm sorry, just yes or no, is the full reconciliation done for Q1 and Q2? Like they know what they may, like LASA's done all they can do around the reconciliation.
Our department hasn't formally met with every single provider on this. We have had meetings with approximately half of the service providers to look at, you have these annual advances, this is the recoupment that we propose, et cetera. We can provide next month And next report, just we've met with all of the providers and they've confirmed, and this is, all of them have visibility on that, Commissioner. But we have started that process. I can't say with certainty that we've met with all 116 providers.
But wasn't this what you were raising, Janine, as the concern? So I'm asking this because you decided at LASA not to pay the advances because you were concerned about outstanding money, but it sounds like the reconciliation process hadn't even fully happened for providers to pay you back.
We delayed in sending the invoices so that we could be sure about where we stood with the service providers and that recoupment. So
But that's still underway in late February. So it hasn't happened for Q1 and Q2. So it doesn't seem fair to hold their advance because the process is slow.
this is why we are releasing the advances.
Okay.
And just in order to do the reconciliation, having 6 months of billing is primordial. We need to obviously base that reconciliation on that. And so now that the contracts, if commissioners recall, in the January committee, there were over 40 million of routing invoices, and there were almost 400 invoices we're still routing. Now that that has been processed, now the reconciliation can actually take place with actual basis. Next slide, please. So this is the Measure H working capital. So of the 34 providers that were issued the 50.8 million of Measure H working capital as far back as 2018, there are 4 that have already, for which all of the Measure H working capital has been recouped. So they have a 0 balance that's flagged with the red, with the green zeros. And since our last report, there are 4 providers for which we've recouped 286,000. I would note specifically the case for St. Joseph Center. At the time of this report, they had actually sent us an additional at the time of this report, we hadn't booked an additional 30,000, but we are verbally informing the commission. So this would actually be higher, 123,000, because the St. Joseph Center, similar to other service providers, is very punctual, very consistent in terms of their repayment. And then in the last report, the commissioners will recall perhaps that we had a little over 70,000 of recoupment for that month. As expected, we're seeing an uptick now in recoupment because the contracts are executed, the cash flow hasn't been completely resolved, but billing has resumed. And so we are expecting an uptick in the recoupment for Q3 and Q4. And that's all our report. If the commissioners have any questions. Thank you very much.
You've been asking questions throughout, so any additional 4.2? Thank you so much.
Can I ask just for the future that we have really I know y'all get Eileen, I know a lot of the docs come in late, but at the last minute, a bold page number for all, so we can all just clearly go back and forth. That'd be awesome. Thank you so much. And then also just on the sound, I know I happened to be sitting here when there was a sound person that came.
Yeah.
So when are we getting the new sound stuff?
We have purchased new equipment, which is en route.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay, good morning again. We're going to be looking at our net financial position. Slide, please. Thank you. So this again is as of February 2. So the numbers that Janine provided earlier are more current. She provided the numbers as of today, but due to the timing of the submission of the report. So these were the numbers that were available on February 2nd. So the cash balance of almost $30 million. The total receivables, 92.7 million, and you'll see that ties down below to the first set of where it ages our receivables. And then the total payables, 107.2 million, and you'll see again down below where it ties to the aging payables with our net working capital of 15.2 million. And you are familiar with these reports. These are the ones that we look at. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the pictorial depiction of net working capital. So our first column is the city, then the county, the state, federal, and private sources, and then our grand total. And I will just highlight here for the net working capital for the amounts that appear to be negative, that is due to a timing difference of when the funds were received and when they were recorded and the amounts that were remitted. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of the funds that are in the interest-bearing account. I'll pause. Is there a question? Sure.
I just was trying to make sure, like, I'm a social worker, and my math is only moderately okay. So what I don't get on
Are
this
we
slide.
on the last slide?
I'm on this slide.
Perfect.
So the AR total for the city is $60 million. Right? That's what that says.
Yes.
$60 million. So the AP total. So I guess I'm trying to understand. And to me, like, ultimately, I would just assume have providers like you're saying, this is the money I'm owed. And because, so AR total and AP total, and then you have the county AR at 28, the county AP. So let's walk through this. So you have $28 million available to you from the county.
No,
Okay, Tommy.
that is, the AR represents cash requests that
You've
are
made.
submitted, that we made, that are not yet paid.
Okay. So I think we need a column. Oh, so then is the cash balance what's been paid? So you have
The
2.9.
cash balance is the cash we have in hand. The AR total is the cash we expect to receive, and the AP total is the cash that we
You're
have to
owed.
pay, that we owe out to service providers.
So on the AP total, I guess I don't quite understand. Why does the county owe you $28 million? Because my understanding is you have all county dollars available, and we want to know if you don't. Why do they owe you 28?
Because we submit ongoing cash requests to the county every month for invoices that are coming in from service providers.
Okay.
There's always going to be a balance there because
You're
every
submitting.
month- right?
And then you have had, like, fully billed through the process from providers. There's 38 million that they're waiting to get.
Yes.
So that means that, and so those are approved invoices waiting to be paid. So we know there's tons more money than that that's already spent and maybe not yet invoiced, or
Yes.
this is like fully invoiced. Everyone agrees it's owed.
Yes, those are invoices that have been submitted and approved and in our accounting system.
Okay. And then, so explain to me the first one then. So you've requested 60 from the city, you owe people 57, but you have 23.9. So why do you have so much that could go toward this 57? Why aren't they getting that in their hands? Is that a question that makes sense?
That's a question that makes sense. I can answer that more granularly when I look at the actual funding sources that are in there. I can provide an answer for you when I can look more
Okay,
granularly.
I mean, that seems like that's kind of the crux, because we're always told the city doesn't pay you. It says right here, you have $23.9 million. So that 57 that's owed would go down by $24 million, which would be amazing for providers to get. So when is that 23.9 going out?
We can provide an update on when exactly each funding source, as we have provided that update every Friday, can go out, and the related items as to why whatever we have cannot be released.
That's the ultimate question, Janine.
I understand that.
That's really tough to see, actually, and surprising. I have no idea.
Yeah, and also I want to highlight that this report is from February 2nd.
Right.
It is February 20th. We issued I'm not sure what we have issued since February 20th, but it is a substantial amount that has gone out the door. So I don't imagine that this cash balance as reflected of 23 million is the cash balance that stands today. This is a point in time.
Mhm.
And I think this is pointing to some of the gaps that you all were lifting up in terms of getting things in, making sure that it's reflective in the reports, and then us having questions about where some of the gaps might be because it's not fully reflected of all the invoices and the work that has been done from the first or from the 2nd to the 20th. So we should be able to see that a bit more clearly in our next meeting, right?
Yeah, and this highlights the need. This highlights the need to establish trends based on a quarterly basis rather than a monthly basis. And this is a moving picture. And I'm not saying that at this time we should move forward with not having a monthly finance committee. I have withdrawn that request, but this highlights the need to look at trends on a quarterly basis, because on a monthly basis, this picture is moving all the time. We have since probably moved out much of that cash balance to pay service providers. It could have been that we received the cash then and recorded it that day. And then in the past, next few days, we released that cash, but we can't see that trend because this report is from February 2nd.
So I feel differently. I feel like this is exactly why the report should be up to date. Otherwise, I'm not here to track trends. Honestly, I know trends are important. Hold on, in the improvement of LAHSA's performance, I want providers to be paid. That to me is our job. LAHSA Commission has long been this bureaucratic entity. I'm not interested in that, honestly. So, like, to me, and also, I get very loud. Our office gets very loud about when the city doesn't pay. Well, if the city has paid you, then that's a problem. I mean, I get what you're saying about the quarterly from a bureaucratic perspective, I want to be able to call back all the providers who have texted me and say, this is what I learned today.
Mhm.
It's not about trends to me. It's about who's going to pay their vendors this weekend. That's all I care about.
And
Maybe I'm different.
I truly understand that service providers need to be paid. Everyone, as we have stated, is working very hard to make sure that that happens. I want to reiterate the point that this report is a point in time, which is not completely reflective of where we actually are today.
And thank you, Janine. And I don't think we are disputing that.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear. I'm also not in any way implying that there are issues with internal controls or with the accuracy of the information that is being given to us. So just want to make that clear. That said, I would reframe it as, yes, this is exactly why we need these reports monthly to have an opportunity to discuss them. And I understand, once again, to me, it's a bit troubling to hear, for example, we don't know at this time how much was paid within the last couple of weeks. I mean, you should know that. You should have that in your internal report. And if you don't have that, if someone else, I'm assuming someone else within your team knows it. Of course they do. And they're working on that at any given time. But the reports are helpful for us.
Yep.
As a commission. And I know they would be extremely helpful for you as well, because then you could address these questions, right, in real time and let us know there is X number of invoices pending. This is, we expect to complete the reimbursement by this date. I mean, I get if we are looking at incomplete data, 100% get that. But we see the value in these discussions. As uncomfortable sometimes they get, right? But hopefully they will also inform necessary changes and an efficiency plan moving forward that the department is committed to engaging in, right? What we heard earlier in your report. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the interest-bearing account. We have the 67 million and the interest received, $253,957 for a total of $67.5 million. And then next slide, please. These are the county payments that happened from December to the due date of February 2. Next slide, please. Same information for the city. You have a question?
Well, this totals 11,454. And it says that you have 23.9 from the city. So there's money that you've had since November that's not been paid, or potentially before, because since December 30th, they've given you 11.4. So that's a lot of money you've had for a couple months that hasn't gone out. Right?
Well, we can't say these are not necessarily the same dollars, right? So this
City, these aren't
coming
city
in.
dollars.
What I'm saying is these are the deposits that we, go ahead. Did you want to the receipts that we've received. But
Mhm.
you're looking again at a point in time. So it's not necessarily, these are not necessarily the same. It feels like you're implying that the money is being held, but that's, yes. So these are new.
Not held in like maliciously, just held like it's not getting out.
Right. Well, it takes time to process the invoices, right? So go ahead.
Enrique Olguin, Associate Director for Budgets. Can we go back one slide? One more. One more, please. Just one caveat I wanted to note. This is high level, city general. I think there are nuances that are not depicted here. For
It's
example,
not all city general. These are city
For example,
funds. But
city
so just to be clear,
funds.
it's not all city general. There's city HAP. There's all kinds of city funding streams, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
The table
that's
is
important.
general. There are nuance in there with various funding sources that there could be a reason why we have an advance, for example, for our internal operations to make payroll. That's all outlined in the advances as to what the purpose of the funding is for. It's not all for providers, and the payables, there's a timing issue as well that was outlined. So that was a caveat that I wanted to note, that there would be cash in hand for internal costs. If a budget's approved for $10 million, $1 million of that is for loss of admin, that's held in-house. The portion proportionate to what the request was. So that
So
is
it
a
would just sit in
nuance
this column. The 1 million, if it's for loss of admin, will sit in that column right there
until
cash
it is paid. Yes, until we pay
yourselves.
payroll. Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So just nuances like that. Maybe this can be expanded or have an addendum to that to show at the funding source level or items like that. So that way it's a little bit more clear. But this is a very high level rolled up version of it, which I understand even for me, it can be confusing at times. Thank you.
Thank you for that context. All right.
Do you get so the interest that's accrued on the interest bearing account, the 253, does that come to LASA? Or does the county keep that?
That's retained in the account. And then like Janine said, when we need to make a draw, then we can leverage those funds.
Well, no, because we were talking about how the process can be arduous, but it is generating funding, which is cool. I didn't know that.
Okay, thank you.
So one thing I want to lift up in the conversations that came up today, and thank you so much, and everyone for your professionalism and your response to the questions and trying to ensure that financial information is shared with the public in a transparent and digestible way. I wonder if we can lift up, because there seems to be a disconnect between what's happening in practice and what folks are understanding in terms of just the day-to-day, why can't I receive them, right? And so I think that breakdown in those two conversations, like, I don't know how we can sort of address that more clearly in whether our communications to service providers or even just our communications to the public or the commission, right? So how we can either develop some timelines of understanding or sort of just have a sort of expectation set for folks, because it is easy if you're just picking up a document, you're saying, oh my gosh, LAHSA has blah, blah, blah from the county, blah, blah, blah from the city, and I submitted this invoice in January and they still haven't paid me, right? So they don't, so bridging the gap of understanding of funding sources, timeline, and then there's just, unavoidable things that are happening, and we have to own the things that happen and explain how we're moving forward, which you all are already doing. So appreciate that and continuing that communication. But I just want to just elevate that, as that seems to be the crux of, and then there's just frustration in being a human and wanting things when you want them. And that is, we can't control that. But for the things that we can control, I'm just offering that potentially that could be a step to sort of bridge these presentations and just for folks to really understand what we're trying to do. So hopefully, I don't know of a good way to do that, but I just wanted to name that as what we're kind of experiencing. So yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for that feedback. We'll take that and see how we can make adjustments.
And we didn't have any public comment, right? I'm sorry, we just been.
No, Commissioner.
Okay, I just have not. So at any time, just stop me. Okay, so we're to the end of our reportings. So again, a deep appreciation of staff. Do we have any commissioner updates and or agenda requests that have not already been elevated from our body? All right, so our next date is, please remind me of when we're reconvening. All right. So with that, it is 10:27. Thank you all for coming early, and meeting is formally adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.